A lot of people think that engineers either can't or don't write, but that is a big misconception. In almost any engineering job, there is some type of writing and or oral communication. This could be in the form of just emails, progress reports, memos on projects, business proposals. It could be procedures or specifications that you're writing, project reports that go outside your company, or even posters. And in fact, oftentimes your job could depend on how well your communication is. For example, you might not get the project for your company if a business proposal is not written well. Or maybe your specific project won't get funded if the reports aren't done well. And you're not likely to get a promotion if your emails are sloppy. So we want to go over some tips for technical writing. First, you want to be clear and concise. Present the facts and nothing else. You don't want to use all those personifications or metaphors or similes that you've learned in English class. This is a time when you want to present just with the facts as clearly and as concisely as possible. And in engineering, we use a lot of numbers. If you have a number at the beginning of a sentence, be sure to spell it out. However, if you have some really long number inside the sentence, 3,465,412, don't spell it out, but write it with digits. And most important, proofread your work, or have someone else proofread it, particularly if it's going outside your company. The fastest way to give a negative impression of your work, and thus of you, is to send something with a lot of spelling errors or grammatical errors. So make sure that you proofread your work. And then use graphs and tables if at all possible. It's a lot easier to grasp the information if it's in a graphical format than if it's in prose. And I'll give you an example. This is a paragraph about the minimum impact energy to cause failure in 1018 cold rolled steel compared to 1018 annealed steel. So it talks about the measurements taken at 4 different temperatures for both the cold rolled steel and the annealed steel, and it gives you all the data. So the data is all here, but if you read through this paragraph, you're going to have to read it several times in order to try to grasp the information from the paragraph. However, if I take that same information and put it into a table format, I have the 4 temperatures on the left there, and the mean impact energy in joule for both the cold roll and the annealed 1018 steel in the table. It's much quicker for the reader to see what the data actually is than it all being in paragraph form. An even better way to present that same data is in a graph. Here we have the mean impact energy for both the cold roll and annealed steel graphed against the temperature. And it's very easy to see that at the lower temperatures, the 1018 annealed steel has a lower impact energy to failure, but at the higher temperatures, it has a higher mean impact energy to failure. So it's the same information that was presented in that paragraph and also in the table, but it's a lot faster for the reader to grasp and understand the data when it's put it in a graph. So if possible, put your data in a graph to present. If not, a table. And the last option would be to put it in prose or in a paragraph form. One type of written communication that we have to do as engineers is a memo. With a memo, you want to try to keep it to 1 page or less. The top of the memo should have a heading with to, from, a subject, and a date. The subject should be descriptive enough so that the person receiving the memo knows what they're going to be reading about. And underneath the heading, you start right into the information you're trying to convey. You don't then put to somebody. You've already put that up in the heading. So you'll have your introduction, a little bit about what the memo is about, your results, then your discussion, the summary. If you have actions that you want to come from the memo, make sure that's very clear, and then possibly references if it's needed. You do not sign the memo down at the bottom. You've already put who it's from at the top. Another common written communication would be a report, maybe a short report or long report. In that case, you always start with an abstract. Many of the higher level people in your company will only read the abstract. So you need to make sure you write a very good abstract. That's where you want to spend the most of your time. The abstract should tell a summary, essentially, of what your report is about and what the conclusions will be. After the abstract comes an introduction, then the procedure if applicable. There, that should probably be in bullet form, not every detail. Okay, this is not a procedure that somebody could go and follow exactly, but just a general bullet form. And then you give the results. Here's where you want to try to include graphs or tables if possible. Do not write your conclusions here, just the results of your what you have done. After the results comes your discussion, where you refer to the graphs and the tables, and then finally you have your summary and your conclusion. Email. Nowadays, almost all of us have access to email on our phone, and we tend to think of them as a text, but emails are not texts. If you are sending a business email, it should not be in the same style or format as a text you might send to your friend with abbreviations and smiley faces, etc. So first, when you are sending an email, make sure that you have a descriptive subject line. The person receiving the email should know what the email is about before they open it. And then at the top of the email, make sure you address the recipient. Just don't start into it. And at the bottom, sign your name and give your contact information. This is especially important if the email is going outside of your company. Yes, they might have your information, but if you give it to them there, it's easy for them. They don't have to do any work to look it up. Your emails should be kept brief and easy to read, and if any actions are required, they should be very clear to the person receiving the email. They should not have to try to sift through it. And please, please, please use correct spelling and appropriate abbreviations. And whatever you do, do not use email to vent. I suggest that you write the email, and the very last thing is to fill in the address for who you are sending the email to and who you are carbon copying. That way, if you inadvertently hit the send button, the email won't be sent before you finish it, and it also gives you time to proof it. And in case you're thinking about venting, you could hold on to it for 24 hours to make sure. Make sure you reread it before you send it. And then be patient. Allow 48 to 72 hours for reply. If you need something immediately, then pick up the phone or get off your chair and go down to somebody's office to ask. Most people in business will only look at their emails once or twice a day. They are not attached to it, reading them every 5 seconds or every 5 minutes. If they did so, they would never get anything done. And then when they do get to their emails, they prioritize based on those subject lines. So that's why you want to make sure that your subject lines are descriptive. Sometimes you can add a tag like urgent to an email. Be very careful doing that. Do not add those urgent tags unless the email is definitely urgent. Your assignment now is to send an email to your EGR 150 instructor to tell them what you hope to learn in this course. Your instructor is going to receive a ton of email, so do not expect a response. Okay, I'd like to spend a few minutes on oral presentations. Before you go to give a talk, make sure you know who your audience is. Are you speaking to a CEO, or people in marketing, or technical folks, or maybe accounting? That'll help you to define your purpose. And then know what your time constraints are. You don't want to be given the talk and have people leave because they have another commitment before you've gotten to your main point. And then, if possible, make sure you know what the logistics are before you give a talk. Are your audience going to be sitting around a big table, or is it in an auditorium where you have a podium? What kind of technology will you have? Knowing these things will help you to prepare a better presentation and a more effective one. When given an oral presentation, it's often beneficial to have some type of visual aid to help in presenting the material. So I'm going to go through a few helpful hints on preparing visual aids. First, you want to keep the slides simple. Think about maybe 60 seconds per slide. They should be in landscape, not portrait format. If possible, make things in bullet format with simple statements or just one words. You don't want to spell out everything. You don't want the audience to be reading the PowerPoint rather than listening to you. And then keep your background simple and consistent. If possible, use graphs over lists and tables. And always, having videos or pictures or diagrams visually help people to grasp the information. So if you can add those in, that is a benefit. These two slides are examples of what not to do in a presentation. They are much too busy. The audience is going to be trying to read this and follow it without listening to you. You want the audience to listen to you and not be focused on the slides. So these two slides are examples of things being too much on there and not effective. A common mistake that people who first start creating PowerPoints make is to try to use really fancy backgrounds. PowerPoint has all types of backgrounds, and then in addition, you can create your own. Well, what happens when you do that is, one, it gets the material much more difficult to read. In this bottom right-hand one with the car, it's very hard to read because the writing goes in and out on dark and light. In addition, the people start focusing on the background instead of the information that you want them to actually look at. So I know it's tempting, but keep the background simple and consistent throughout your presentation. Don't try to get fancy. Here's a slide on product information for a product that's going to be launched in November. The sentences, there's only, 5 points, and they're pretty simple, talking about the bright colors, the safety features, sizes, flexibility. But this example has the same information in a much simpler format. So the title is easier to see, and then the 5 points that the speaker wants to make are just in bullet points. So they can refer to color and tell, yes, we want to have these bright colors to attract attention. Or the sizes, now we're going to have 3 sizes. Or now we're going to have a live help desk. So they can talk about it without having every word written on the slide. And this is a much more effective way to use your visual aids. You don't want to put everything on your slide. You don't want the audience to be reading it. So put the key words and then you speak from those words. All right, fonts. Just like Word, PowerPoint has all types of fonts and colors. When you are selecting your color, make sure that it contrasts with the background. Dark on dark is very difficult to read. And when typing, make sure to avoid all caps and italics. Use 18-point font or greater. You don't want your audience straining to read what you wrote. And then fancy fonts may not convey the correct tone that you want and also can be difficult to read. So I suggest staying away from the fancy fonts. Here are 2 slides with the same information, but the one on the right is a much better visual aid. The font and background colors have a higher contrast, and the information is given in bullet format, so the audience isn't trying to strain to read a paragraph. Remember, when you are creating your visual aids, you want the visual aids to support your talk, not take away or replace you. Here are 3 examples of too much information on a slide. The audience will be trying to read the slide and not listening to the speaker. Then they're going to get frustrated because they can't see the slide or understand it. It's just too much information. At that point, they've already have stopped listening to the speaker, so they're going to tune out of the whole thing, and you have essentially lost your audience. So when you are making visual aids, make sure that you make good, strong visual aids. Otherwise, instead of being a help, they are a detriment to your talk.